And welcome to this week's episode of the Combat Child podcast. We're going to be talking about the most recent UFC 294 card. Took place in Abu Dhabi. It was a really good card. Overall, everything from the early prelims to the main card. Couple doctor stoppages questionable, to say the least. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's just one of these things. It was a shame though, really, because I feel like a lot of these doctor stoppages were on really good fights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ankalaev fight really that put down on the main card for me.
And it's frustrating really because you look at what the doctor was doing. The doctor might not be most experienced, or maybe he is, or who knows what happened exactly. But to have that, what was it he asked him? Do you know where you are?
Yeah, and his response was, "I'm in the desert. We're in the Middle East," and he said, "Oh well, he must have thought that wasn't a good enough answer."
I suppose maybe he was looking for we're in Abu Dhabi or we're in the arena or we're in the octagon. Maybe he was looking for something like that. But the one which shot me most really was the doctor stoppage prior to that.
The Victor Henry one, nut kick.
Yeah, didn't hit you there.
No,
Didn't hit you there.
the ref to tell him that didn't hit him in the nuts.
That is some next level audacity. I mean, I think that's beyond outrageous personally, but at the end of the day,
slap him for that.
It has happened, and it's just happened, and hopefully he doesn't do too much doctoring.
Yeah,
you know. So not in the UFC anyway. Maybe in like something.
Yeah, that was like terrible. Like the Victor Henry one, he had to go. He was taken to hospital after the fight, and he had a testicular scan, like see the damage, and the damage hasn't come out yet. But it didn't look nice. He was in a lot of pain. There was also we're gonna get into the Nathaniel Wood fight, but the nut shots in that one as well. There was a lot of fouls this card, I thought.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, and I think there was a lot which got away with as well. I'm quite shocked about the lack of point deductions. There should have been a few more, especially considering they were all relatively avoidable. Primarily knees on the floor.
Yeah.
Which it's one of these things. I feel like it's not something which we see too commonly, and it's not something which happens too commonly because for the most part these fighters are very much aware that this is a very easy way to lose a point or a DQ. And it's bizarre because you'd think that they'd be taking points off and being really hot on that, but the fact that it kept happening over again, maybe fighters are seeing it and thinking, all right, there's a bit of leeway here, because a knee on the floor, when we talk about MMA rules, etc., one of the things they talk about is whether you should be allowed to knee on the floor or not, because a lot of the time, if somebody's in a turtle, it's very hard to do anything to them, and a knee on the floor is often the best thing to do to them, although you can't do that.
Yeah, I think that it's a whole different argument if knees on the floor to knees to a grounded opponent should be allowed. We see it in one championship, and from the sort of fights I've watched over there, I haven't watched loads, but I've watched a few fights, a few of their cards, the big ones, and you don't see any more barbarics or brutal knockouts from these knees on the floor than. I mean, if you get kneed anywhere on the floor or in standing, it's going to hurt, and usually it puts people out. So I think it's a whole nother argument just allowing it, because I was more on the side of sort of, I like the fact that you weren't allowed to knee a grounded opponent, but when you see these fighters, they're kind of like, especially Aljamain Sterling, we saw in the Henry Cejudo fight where he was just turtling, and there's nothing you can do to them there, and it looks like you're in the dominating position, but you can't do much apart from maybe put a lot of pressure on the neck or try to go for a front lock choke. So I think it would be interesting to see if they could sort of get that rule lifted down in the future.
I think it's one of these things when it came down to initially making the UFC and the rule set, there are lots of interesting rules, for example, the 12-6 elbow. That's too barbaric, apparently, but I think an elbow anywhere on the ground is going to cause some severe damage to you, and I don't think it's going to make too much of an impact. A 12-8 elbow, I feel like a lot of the time, if I'm honest with you, is going to cause less damage.
Yeah, definitely.
Because some of these elbows, when people are putting all their force behind it, it's hard to get a clean 12-8 elbow a lot of these times. It's hard to be in a position where you're landing 12-8 elbows.
12-6.
Well, 12-6, yeah. Looking at a clock, that doesn't quite make sense, does it? 12, yeah, you definitely have to do a 12, 12-8 elbow.
12-8 is the proper way to do an elbow.
No, but so I think with these 12-6 elbows, I mean, it's the same thing again. It's just MMA ruling in general. But enough on that. Let's talk about some individual fights on the card. If you want to start us off.
Yeah, so I think it'll be sensible to, break down the fights that we spoke about last week, but we can touch on a few of the other ones if you've got any interesting points you want to bring up. But I think it makes sense to start with the first fight on the card, the anticipated debut of Shara Bullet going against Bruno Silva. Not an easy matchup for his first fight, and Bruno Silva never been knocked out prior. He'd been dropped and submitted, but we saw that chin and toughness on display. Bruno Shara might have showed a bit of weakness in his takedown defense, but he still managed to put up a decision win.
So it's really interesting. Looking at Shara, his performances outside the UFC have been so high level, and whether you can comment on his opponents, regardless, you have to look at the technical ability of him. Going into it, he's definitely a prospect, and he's got room to grow, and there are certain holes in his game which I think are relatively exploitive. But this performance, like you said, Bruno Silva is such a tough opponent to take on your first fight in the UFC for a UFC debut. Bruno Silva is so tough, and he's also very experienced as well. He has fought the best fighters. He fought former champion.
Yeah.
He is so high level, and he fought somebody. Pereira could be a champion again.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to break down that Yuri Prochazka fight, but that's a tough matchup to call.
Oh, it really is, because it's interesting because Yuri Prochazka, that's an exciting fight.
I cannot wait.
And Yuri Prochazka always brings excitement to the table. I feel like the Yuri Prochazka fight we broke down with it was
Teixeira,
Glover Teixeira was so fun.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be like that again, because I don't feel like Alex Pereira is a man you have a lot of fun with.
No.
I think he's a man who's very Terminator-like and looking to just take you clean out. But regardless, it's a very exciting fight, and it's a challenging fight for both fighters, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a very high level, but obviously we're not talking about that card. We're talking about this card.
We saw Bruno Silva. How he managed to obviously not deal with Alex Pereira, because he did lose that fight, and he hasn't really looked the same since. But it just shows his toughness to be able to hang in there for all 3 rounds and eat every left hook he had to throw, knees to the face. So it shows his toughness, and I feel like he did give Shara a really hard debut. He landed some good shots on the feet in the first round, but for me it was Shara Bullet's kicks. He uses his kicks like most people use their hands, just as distance finders, and now and again he'll commit to one. We saw the question mark kick a number of times. He kicks from pretty much clinching range. He's got just such a diversity of weapons when it comes to his kicks, and he's just showed that off, and I feel like that's kind of what bumped him up on the points, and the damage he was able to do when he got off his back. How impressed were you with him, with those elbows?
It's beyond impressive. I think if there was maybe a fighter who wasn't Bruno Silva, they would have been out, because elbows like that was malicious and it was continuous. He's so strong on the feet, and like you said, the way he uses kicks, he uses them like his hands, distance management, almost like jabs.
Yeah.
And from the get-go, he's throwing his leg kicks, and it's like he's chopping wood. It's just repeatedly, it's hammering those legs. Bruno Silva on the feet in the first round, very impressed. He looked really sharp, and he looked really sharp all throughout the fight. But I think with Bruno Silva, it's something which he showed off really well and displayed really well was wrestling. And I think unfortunately it may have displayed a potential weakness in the game of Shara Bullet. I think that's something which he could very much potentially struggle with, and something he's going to need to work on. Overall, though, Shara Bullet's performance, he was throwing some absolute crazy stuff. I think there's a spinning back fist he threw, it didn't land, but you watch people do that, the UFC debut, that's finishing a lot of fighters.
If he lands that, he's like inches away from getting one of those spectacular moments in his UFC debut.
Oh, definitely so, and I think regardless, his UFC debut, to think this was the first fight on the early prelims.
Yeah, crazy.
Overall, the card was stacked. There weren't any real bad fights on it. With Shara Bullet, just his performance is so impressive. You can say what you want about who he's fought in the past, but if you look at his technical ability, if you look at what he's done, I just want to see more from him in the future. I really do, and I think he has so much potential. He needs to work on that takedown defense.
Yeah, I think they need to really think about who they're gonna match him up with next, because you could Bruno Silva was not a guy known for his wrestling. He's a guy with 20 knockouts and very good kickboxing and toughness, and he keeps on the feet and makes it a war. And, credit to Shara Bullet for making him into a wrestler. He did not want much to do with him on the feet, so fair play there. But if that's even someone like a Brendan Allen, if he can just sort of not get knocked out, and if he gets him in those positions, he's not going to stay in his guard and not throw any punches and to just let Sharo land elbows, he's going to look to take the back or armbar. People who can, and there's a lot of middleweights who can do that. So I think they need to be careful with who they match him up with. Maybe not another striker. Don't rush him into the rankings too quick. I know that fight was kind of just outside the rankings, but I think take it slow, build him up, and they could make a star out of him.
Oh, definitely. So, like you said about the letting Bruno sit his guard, there are lots of fighters who are getting out of guard very
Yeah.
quickly and causing some serious damage on the ground, transitioning into some very strong and dangerous positions.
Mm.
He doesn't look strong on the ground, and he didn't look strong when it came down to stuffing the takedowns. Bruno Silva was very impressive with his wrestling.
Yeah.
However, overall, there are definitely fighters in my division who can wrestle and can grapple significantly better than Bruno Silva, and that's something to look out for. But overall, taking it away, what an impressive debut! Like,
Yeah, and put on a great fight for the first fight. The card kind of really got it going. And getting on to the next fight, we'll talk about a fight that frustrated me a lot. The Nathaniel Wood fight. Obviously, we were accustomed to seeing fouls in that fight as well against Gafarov. How do you think that fight went for Wood?
so it's really disappointing. I think I called second round submission,
Mm,
and I was watching it, and all I could think to myself was he's going to submit him.
yeah,
All I could. First round, it looks like he's going to submit him. Second round, the fouls very frustrating. Why they're not deducting points? Was it two?
yeah. Two nut strikes and a fence grab was in there as well.
Yeah, it's seems like a bit biased there, but it's it's one of those things. It's so disappointing, really, because you look at Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood is looking so good at the moment, and he's so consistently strong. He may not be suited for that weight class,
Yeah,
although if that's how he feels most comfortable fighting at, he's gonna know his body better than
yeah.
anyone else. He's gonna know what's best for him. It's hard to make somebody fight out of their comfort zone, especially if it's going to impact their performance. Um, that fight though, yeah, disappointing really, and it is appalling that you allow that to happen and that you don't deduct the point.
Yeah, I think there has to be a point deducted. He did land a big strike in the first round, which set the pace, dropped Nathaniel Wood to a knee, I think, and then after that, the nut strike came, kind of broke up the rhythm, and Nathaniel Wood was kind of held down for the rest of the round. But when he did break out of that, he landed a big right hand, dropped him himself, but probably wasn't enough to win that first round. The second round, there's another nut shot. He gets it going a bit more, but I feel like the weight difference was a big thing. He looked like the weaker man in there, and sort of being held against the fence in those positions, it wasn't good for him because when he did go out and strike, he started taking over the fight.
And that's the thing with Naimov. I feel like he really did put a stop to the momentum
Mm.
because every time he was doing successful, every time he was doing what he was doing well and potentially looking to finish the fight, because I did genuinely feel like there was going to be a submission there.
Yeah,
Watching it, it looked as if he's about to sub him. Throw him at groin strike, it interrupts the rhythm, but it's also very hard to fight when you're in severe pain.
mm.
And he would have definitely been in severe pain. There's no way you're comfortable, or there's no way you're able to fight at your best when you've been striking him with groin twice,
Yeah,
especially when it happens twice. Because you got to think these are 3 round fights,
mm.
twice in the space of a 15-minute period.
Probably like 6 minutes in between, at most maybe like 4 minutes in between both nut strikes.
If you're not deducting points, they're getting away with it.
Yeah, because that has an impact on the fight. I think as well we can't just blame the fouls. I think, to be fair, I do think it was a really close fight anyway, without the fouls. And I think you can sort of point to Nathaniel Wood not having the best fight IQ in some moments, kind of drop into the Kimura when he just managed to get back up was the big one in the second round. I think there was like a minute left. Maybe he could have broke away and put a stamp on the end of that round, but he drops in for a Kimura and gives up the position again, which you can't blame. You can't blame Naimov for for that one, can you really? So,
No, not so. I do think Nymov did perform very well.
mm,
I think it's just a shame about the fouls really,
yeah,
and he was definitely allowed to get away with it, and the impact I had as well. Nathaniel Wood was looking so good.
mm,
He was looking so strong. He often does.
he's so
The
technical.
striking was really high level, which was
Yeah,
something which is really good to see. He's so versatile,
mm,
everything he does. He's but yeah, I think the weight difference as well.
yeah.
The weight difference of fouls is. I feel like every matchup for Nathaniel Wood doesn't quite look right.
Mm. I was in London when he fought Andre Philly, and that one was a heart in the mouth fight because it was a war, and when you're fighting these bigger guys, I mean, we spoke about this enough last week, so we're not going to go too far into it. Yeah, it is a big sort of disadvantage, and we saw that again on the weekend. I think he is going to have a successful career at 145 still. He's just such a good fighter. I think if they ran that fight back, I back him to win again. So he just got to keep going. Try if he's got no injuries, try fight again soon. Try get more active. I think that's the main thing.
Mm.
uh, I think you wanted to talk about the last fight on the early prelims a little bit because you were impressed with Mike Breeden, weren't you? Not had the best start to his UFC career, but yeah, we got the comeback winning that one.
So I was impressed with Mike Breeden. I was also really impressed with Anshul Julie. To
Mm,
think first ever Indian UFC fighter. It's very exciting. Unfortunately, I think with India, I don't think we're going to see lots of high level fighters come out of it, just from how it is built up culturally. But overall, Jubilee's technical ability on the feet, he looked like he has the potential to go on. Later on in his career, he still only had 7, 8 fights or so
mm.
to go on and potentially be a contender.
I think that as well, it only takes for a guy like him to kind of. Or I think there's another Indian fighter on the roster now who's very good as well. It only takes sort of one big star to come out of those countries, and then it can sort of start a generation.
Oh, definitely. So it's interesting because I feel like with England, even as bizarre as it might sound, British MMA, there's been lots of good English fighters,
Mm,
but right now we're kind of in. It doesn't feel too obvious, but we're in almost like a prime,
yeah,
and it's not something which I feel like it doesn't feel as if it's happening so much because obviously there are always going to be more American fighters
yeah,
and more of these Dagestani fighters than there are going to be. But if you actually look at how many fighters in the UFC are from England and how strong they are, then that's I suppose, from a proportion, or if you look at it from a perspective,
yeah.
almost, if you will, a perspective, it's it's very exciting.
Mm,
But and yeah, like you said about India, I mean, we could potentially see it. But his performance on the feet,
yeah,
first 2 rounds, he's smoking Mike Breen, and Mike's somebody who, like you said, hasn't had the best start to his UFC career. His record is very, very poor, and he was getting pieced up. He was getting outclassed in every way. Third round, it all
mm,
changes.
yeah,
Now, it's a shame in one hand because it's really cool to see, but you kind of got to feel bad for Jubilee
yeah. I did feel sorry for him.
because he's doing so well. He's fighting out of skin. He's fighting so technically. In his head, he's got the 100%, 110% fight IQ. And then all of a sudden, he's disrupted. Somebody like Mike Breeden barking at you can't be great for a trainer for. And everything he was doing so calculated, he crumbled. Another
Mm,
thing as well, he gassed.
yeah, yeah. I think the commentators were kind of trying to push a narrative that he's getting in his head, but he was clearly very tired. And I mean this. I mean, I'm sure most fighting fans will know what I mean when I say this. That Mike Breeden represented Mexico with that one. Like, though it was a Mexican performance, the way he took the shots and came back in the later rounds, and that style as well, barking and taunting. He really did kind of push the pressure and have that boxing style that we all love to see. And we've been treated by some amazing Mexican boxers and fighters in the UFC, and we're getting more now. I'm not sure if he is he born Mexican.
He fights under a USA flag.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he,
And
but
he was talking about his post fight conference, post fight interview about Kansas City, I believe.
mm,
So, but there could definitely be heritage there.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, third round, Jubilee was fatigued. He was knackered, and you could see it in the second round. It was really beginning to set in, and it's a shame, really, because when you're looking at that in the second round, although we have these very high level fighters, Shemaev. I think Shemaev is somebody who doesn't necessarily tire easily, but tires a bit quicker than what you'd
Mm,
want him to for the level he's fighting at. I think that you can go far with it, but you can't be gassing out like that against someone like Mike Breen.
no.
And in his post-fight interview, he's talking about how he's not the best start and he always starts off poorly. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe he does genuinely just start off slow, start off a little bit poorly,
Mm,
and he just doesn't. He warms into it. There was that savage cut, and it looked as if he was hanging by a thread.
yeah, the
His
skin.
eyebrow. I don't think it was as bad as it looked,
No.
but regardless, it looked very bad. And you can just see it throbbing,
Mm,
just hanging and dangling off, and we pressed it off, and he comes back, and it's almost like it ignited something in him
yeah.
because watching that fight, the first 2 rounds, you would never have expected for him to come out barking, shouting, taunting, and the way he was exchanging as well, he was so aggressive.
Yeah.
The pressure for somebody who had just been getting pieced up for 2 rounds, he looked as if he really just had that dog in him.
Yeah.
And I think that fighters like that, unfortunately, if you can't make it to the third round, or if you can't win those first 2 rounds and you're fighting these round fights, it's not always a good thing if you're not finishing your opponent. But regardless, it was just a really impressive performance from him, and what a comeback as well.
Yeah, I think that kind of saves his UFC career. Get another fight after that one because I don't know how many he lost in a row, but it was a few, wasn't it? So
Mm.
yeah, getting on to the next fight, we'll jump straight to the Tim Elliott Mohammed Mokaev fight. I think we can talk a bit about this one because Mohammed Mokaev to do what he's doing at I think 23 years of age is just insane.
I'd definitely say he was the youngest fighter on the card,
Mm,
and he looks so impressive. Fighting out UK as well,
mm,
which is pretty cool. He looked the wrestling in particular was so impressive. I remember I think it was one of the later rounds, second or third round, where 2 minutes on top of him, and the reversal.
yeah, it's third round I think.
Third round was beyond impressive. That requires such technical ability, which
Yeah,
we're not seeing from a lot of these fighters who are very good at wrestling. He's also very good on the feet as well,
mm,
but I think that his wrestling was elite. Tim Elliott's a tough opponent.
yeah. To finish Tim Elliott, not many people have done that, so it's a very impressive thing to do. Like I said, at his age, I think he's going into the top 10 after that one as well. So called out Manuel Cape, Kai Kara France next. I think we're all hoping they kind of fight each other. Manuel Cape and Kai Kara France after the exchanges they were having at the Strickland Izzy press conference. So it'll be interesting to see who he fights next going into that top 10. I think he's a few wins off a title shot. I think what is he, 5 wins, 5 finishes in the UFC, maybe 6. And the people he's beaten are doing very well in the UFC now themselves. So,
Yeah, he's on an altitude tear and he's at that age as well.
mm,
It'd be great. That's what I mean. Like, this prime generation of UK fighters. It would be great to see more fighters around his age come up. And like you said, he is on a tear and he is doing so well. Tim Elliott's a hard opponent to do that to. Not to
yeah,
say that Tim Elliott got dominated because I wouldn't say he necessarily did, but
no,
Mikhaev definitely showed his class. He definitely showed his technical ability and his wrestling. What do they call him? The Dagestani from Wigan, or
yeah. I think that's what the fans call him, to be
well,
fair,
I
yeah.
mean, he's definitely got it in his blood.
Mm,
The way he's the way he's thrown down.
yeah.
But yeah, no, overall, really impressive performance and just something to really look forward to as well.
Yeah, and I think going back to the point that he wasn't dominating, I think all of the judges actually had him down going into the third round. So what's your take on that?
UFC judging is always going to be
Mm,
bizarre. It's we've spoken about so much. It's almost boring at this point. With UFC judging, it's hard to judge, and I appreciate that, but they just need a new judging system.
yeah, I think the fight was close. There was a few submission attempts from Tim Elliott, but to say that he won both the first 2 rounds, yeah, it's just not true. I think maybe one always a fair, but it's not the worst judging we've seen. We've seen a lot worse.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
I think there's a few negatives. We don't like to be those who point out the negatives, but there is a few little flaws that I see in Makayev. Kind of leaves his chin up sometimes, and he does keep getting caught in these submission attempts. how worried are you? What obviously being a fan watching him and how close these submissions are getting.
It's concerning. It really is. I think that this is something Mikhail's going to work on though, and I think it's something he's going to get better at
Mm,
because he's so young and he's fighting at a high level relatively quickly. He's kind of just jumped into it. I think that this is something which he's going to improve on. The way he's developing, he must be receiving some world class coaching
yeah.
because his come up, 23 years of age, there are not many fighters whatsoever doing that at all. If you look at a lot of fighters in the UFC, I don't know what the average age is off the top of my head, but I imagine it's in the late 20s,
Yeah.
27, 28.
Yeah.
I'd say so. So to be doing what he's doing at the moment, I imagine that if you were to give it maybe potentially few years, I think
Two
that these
years.
flaws are going to be
Mm,
minimized. I
yeah.
think there's always going to be area of opportunity. There's always going to be weaknesses, but these really simple things, I really do think that they're going to crack down on. It's concerning for now, but he's so young.
And I mean, you could say Tim Elliott's one of the best grapplers in that division, and I mean there was a few close calls, but overall he had the better of the wrestling exchanges, and he won by submission in the end in the third round. So just more credit to Makayev, and it's exciting to see where he goes on to the next one. And I think now getting onto the main card. Obviously, there's no fights to break down this week, so we're concentrating on just these fights. So the main card, what do you think of it? I think the average fight time for all the fights is like 25 minutes. It's crazy.
First two fights finishes, I called Warrior hours. You've always got to have an hour where you just pick.
Yeah, fair enough.
Saeed Nurmagomedov. Gafarov's good, but I think what you said, looking back at it now, reflecting on it, it's hard because what Gafarov does, he does very well, but I don't feel like he does it to fighters like Saeed. These
No.
fighters who are this good at the distance management, these fighters who are causing damage during the distance
Mm,
management. That's what a lot of it is as well. A lot of fighters can distance manage or attempt to distance manage well, but if a lot of these fighters break through, something which Gafarov had a very hard time doing so.
yeah.
First fight, great. Second fight, we
Mm.
didn't talk about it.
Yeah, the first fight on the card, Said, he's shown how dangerous that guillotine is for him, and Gafarov is more of a submission guy. I think he's got seven wins by submission. If off the top of my head, that could be wrong, but um, so that was kind of the path to victory. But in my eyes, he just rushed it. I think that it's probably the biggest stage he's ever fought on, and Said kind of overextended on one of his kicks and he just rushed in for the double leg and left his neck straight in there, and Said could just snatch that up on that, and we know how brutal he is with with those guillotines, and he showed it yet again.
Oh, definitely. So it's almost like an overexcitement,
Yeah.
just charging in there. And it's a shame, really, because it's quite a simple flaw, which these high level fighters will just take advantage of.
Mm.
And it is a shame that he did allow this to happen to him. Just the over eagerness, just the over excitement. I'd like to see more from Gafarov.
Mm.
I really would. But overall, it's a good fight to start the main card on.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not bad.
Going into the next one, Ikram Askarov, uh, only one loss in his whole career, obviously being to Hamzat Chimaev, and two brutal knockouts since joining the UFC now. And we talk about power punches. He looks like he's right up there with those power punches because he started the finish off with a solid jab, dropped Alves to his feet, to his feet, to the floor, and then on the stand up lands a flying knee and a combination to finish it off. Brutal first round knockout. I think your pick was a bit outrageous. Like you said, we will kind of have one on every card. I mean, on my actual picks, on the ones that we picked on verdict, I picked Volkanovski by third round knockout. So, we saw how mental that one was.
There was a knockout, to be fair.
Yeah.
Clean
But
one as well.
how impressed are you with Ikram Askarov? He was obviously meant to be fighting Paulo Costa here. But, Wally Alves was taking the fight on middleweight, but he dealt with it.
So, personally, I think that was an early stoppage. I think that he was. No, on a serious note, looking at Worley, it's a tough fight. It's a massive mismatch. It's a fight you took on very short notice. And I think when you're fighting an opponent who's booked to fight Paulo Costa. It's it's a big fight, and it's interesting that they got him to take the fight. No disrespect to Woolry, he didn't look sharp enough from the get-go. He
No.
wasn't active enough at all, really. He wasn't doing what he needed to do. There wasn't very much in what he was doing. Not to say that he wasn't pressing forward, but he wasn't doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And he was just leaving himself too vulnerable as well. These fighters will just take you clean if you leave it too vulnerable. And it's a shame that it was such an early finish. Woolry Alves is, in my opinion, I think that was a very poor matchup. But at the same time, you also have to look at from the UFC's perspective. You have to make these fights.
Yeah.
Really impressive performance from Leskarov. Like you said, power puncher. He hits hard and he hits well as well. And it's not necessarily always the most technical looking, but you can tell it's heavy.
Yeah. I think, in my opinion, he needs a big matchup next because you look at, he meant to fight Paulo Costa, fought Phil Hawes, knocked him out in the first round, even more brutally than this one. So I think if you're willing to put him against Paulo Costa, I think someone else stepped up, maybe like Delije or something was booked as well, someone like that. Maybe put him against Marvin Vettori next. See if someone can finally crack Marvin Vettori's chin. I think that's a great matchup. But he needs one of these big fights next.
Oh, yeah, definitely so.
Going on to the next one, not much to talk about. I think we could talk about more kind of about outside this fight because there was one big moment with the body shot and Johnny Walker almost lands that flying knee, but a terrible referee, and we've already spoke about the incident earlier on in the podcast, but how good was you watching this? Was one of the bangers of the card.
It's a shame because with this, I didn't know what to expect. This is a fight which I had a very hard time trying to call.
Yeah, same.
Because I feel like it could have potentially gone either way. It could have been a matter of Ankalaev picking him apart technically from the middle, or Johnny Walker throwing some absolutely crazy stuff. I'm like you said, the flying knee attempts.
Yeah, so quick. Have you seen the screenshot of Johnny Walker's about 5 foot in the air and the knee is just stopped right near his chin?
I mean, that is beyond impressive, and he's interesting, Johnny Walker, because I feel like fans either rate him or just don't. And with Johnny Walker, we've seen kind of a bit of variation to him.
Yeah.
In the sense of how consistent he is. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel like he's consistent enough to rate him as highly as we do. It was a knee on the ground, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I wasn't aware that they did concussion tests for knees on the ground. I suppose it would make sense. It's a big blow to the head, but you wouldn't do it out of a head kick unless they were finished. Or like a head kick is not an example because a head kick can do you in very easily. But
it's an illegal strike, though, isn't it? So.
It's an illegal strike, and the doctor, he speaking about talking to a fighter previously about not getting hit with a groin shot, and then doing that, asking where it is. If he doesn't know where it is, there are lots of things that can happen. There could be translation issues. He might genuinely just be so amped up. In his eyes, he's thinking to himself all week, oh, I'm fighting in the desert.
Yeah.
He didn't visually look as if he was completely out of it at all.
Yeah.
He actually looked completely fine. And if that's the call you want to make, I can understand with that, because with that, it's a matter of, okay, so this call we're going to make, if this is because an illegal shot's happened, we've had to step in, we've spoken to him, we've looked at him, he's saying he's in the desert, he's in the Middle East, but he is in the Middle East. In his eyes, he's fighting in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And to see what happened afterwards, that was interesting.
I love that bit. That bit was fun. Them trying to fight each other with everyone in the cage.
Pushing referee like 4 times.
Dana White having them run in and to calm it down.
It's one of those things, though. I feel like the moment Dana White walks in,
shit gets real.
It gets real.
Yeah.
That's your job on the line right there. It's really disappointing, and I feel like the fight could have definitely gone on. With head injuries, I understand why they're cautious to an extent, but with this, it's just not something you call or somebody tells you in the desert. Ask him where in the desert.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one to say, but watching it, I thought, what the ref is, the doctor, he's trying to be like center of attention. It seemed like you're not the star. He had the problem with Victor Henry telling him he didn't get kicked in the nuts. Like, what is he doing? Like, I think you've got to raise serious questions to him, not because of translation issues and such, because of a bit of unprofessionality, in my opinion.
Well, this is the thing. If somebody tells you that they're severely injured, and somebody like Victor Henry isn't the type of person to roll around the floor and scream,
No,
that's not something which I think you see from any UFC fighter typically.
maybe Aljo.
Well,
I'm joking.
it's like you said, unprofessional,
Yeah.
and it's almost as if he's watching it like a fan
Mm.
in a bizarre way. If that makes any sense, it's almost as if he's watching it and he's like, "Oh, great shot." Wait, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's like if you watch boxing and you're talking about, is it below the belt, is it above the belt? It's the same thing again. In his eyes, although there's somebody screaming and rolling around the floor, he didn't get kicked there.
Yeah.
He did.
Mm.
And with this as well, center of attention, I mean, it could potentially be the case.
Mm.
I think that the experience, Dana did speak about the inexperience, that's fine, but why are we having an inexperienced doctor check on the fighters at one of what could be, well, what is going to be one of the biggest cards of the year,
Mm.
especially with the changes as well, the Usman, the Chimaev.
Yeah.
So overall, it's very disappointing. It's very disappointing that it allowed to happen. And overall, refereeing and doctoring on the card was
Not
overall just
great.
very, very poor.
Yeah.
To think that you're not doctoring points, you're telling fighters that you're lying as they roll around screaming on the floor in pain.
Mm.
It's just not really acceptable, is it?
No. Going on to the co-main event now. Way more competitive than I think most of us thought. In my opinion, it's a draw. I'm just going to go straight ahead and say that. I think on the night I was saying I don't think it's a 10-8, but borderline 10-8, and all three judges gave it 10-8. Surely they know more than me, right? So
Well,
maybe, hopefully.
perhaps it's another hard one to call. I think it could have been a draw.
Yeah.
I do think Chimaev potentially edged it.
Mm.
I think that Usman might potentially edge it.
Yeah.
Like you said, though, the Usman did so much better than I think a lot of us expected. I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to come across as disrespectful, but I thought Usman was going to get absolutely smoked.
So did I. I didn't want to say it, but
Because at the end of the day, there are what look like vulnerabilities in this game. But something which really impressed me about Usman was his striking.
mm.
I don't feel like it's something which we see a lot from Usman, or we don't see enough of it because he is such a ground heavy fighter. He's somebody which likes to take his hands to the ground and do what you can to him on the ground. Props to Chimaev. Usman hasn't been taken down in the UFC much at all, and that really shows Chimaev's technical ability and his wrestling. I thought Chimaev would be slightly better on the feet. Whether he was or not, perhaps, but Usman, for such short notice, what performance.
Yeah, I think there's rumours that Shamar broke his hand in that first round as well, so maybe that had a part to play. Not being able to throw his power shots. But I think just credit to Usman, and he's not washed up like some people thought. He maybe he's the middleweight. I think Robert Whittaker called him out today, so that's a great matchup. I think Shamaev, I'd like to see him fight one more before he gets a title shot. I don't think that will happen. I think Duplessis deserves a title shot, but overall, probably the best fight in the main card. Usman showing that he's still got it, and there's not much more to say on that one. I was just at how impressive both fighters were.
To be able to do that on such short notice, that shows how high level you are.
Yeah,
Because you have no time to prepare whatsoever. And you are fighting an opponent who's living in Dubai. He's been in Dubai for over a month. Did he walk out with a
Dubai flag.
UAE flag?
Yeah, UAE, not a Dubai flag.
Dubai, well, that's part of the UAE. It's one of them.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's a big fight to take, and he looks elite.
Yeah.
He really does, and he could definitely potentially look for that title shot again. Eventually, not after coming off a loss. With Chimaev, Duplessis probably does deserve it, but Chimaev is such a fan favorite,
Yeah.
and his personality, whether you love it or you hate it. I actually quite like it.
Yeah, I like him. I didn't like the missing weight and trying to fight every single person he walked past backstage, but overall, he's a fighter who brings excitement, and the stare he was giving Usman before the fight started, he's just a scary dude, and that's the thing that sells well, and I think that's probably why he gets the next title shot.
It's almost like it's a super villain, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly.
It's got
He's
an
like a
arc and
villain
everything.
arc, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't want to talk for ages about this one because I still haven't got over it. Islam head kicks Volk in round one. A pain in that one for me.
It's so disappointing because the first fight was probably one of the best fights I've ever watched.
Yeah, same.
And this fight was finished not because Volk had a poor training camp, because of a vulnerability which could have been exposed on multiple occasions. The head kick was beautiful, and the way he aimed it, the accuracy, he hit the exact part of the head he wanted to with the exact part of his leg. And Makhachev's striking, it's almost like he's got everything now.
Mm.
Because I feel like with Volk, when we looked at Volk, especially in the featherweight division, he looked complete.
Yeah,
And Makhachev's really beginning to look complete.
yeah,
A lot of people are asking, is he potentially the GOAT? When they talk about Khabib being the GOAT. And if you look at what he has, I think he has more than Khabib on the feet,
yeah,
and the wrestling is high level. Makhachev did expose Volk. It's a shame, really, because Volk's guard was slightly higher, if he's protecting his chin,
yeah,
and it's understandable why he's protecting his chin, but raising it slightly, I feel like he'd be able to protect it if he were to just move his hand.
mm.
I think he's got the IQ and vision to do it quick enough, and the reflexes. It was a really big vulnerability. Overall though, Makhachev, you can't hate on him. Volk's gonna keep fighting.
Yeah. I mean, he apparently still wants to fight Tapora in January, so that just shows his mindset. Not coming out and making some comments I don't really like to hear about how bad he is doing mentally when he's not in training camp. But overall, it's more just I don't want to talk too much about Volk because just how good Islam is. Like he's got the grappling threat, maybe not as Khabib. I think Khabib would have taken down Volk and controlled it a bit more, but he's got that grappling threat where he can submit anyone in that lightweight division and on the feet, he can. I think he can legitimately put a good fight against anyone on the feet too. He dropped Oliveira and submitted him. I want to see him fight Justin Gaethje. I think he'll do decent on the feet in that fight, and I think we could see him go on to be the best lightweight ever, and he'll probably move up to welterweight and try and fight for that title as well. So, hats off to Islam.
And Makhachev striking as well,
Yeah,
where he
so
is
good.
continuously improving how high level it is.
Mm. But we were going to talk about the Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich announcement. We're both super excited to hear that maybe another British champion on the horizon. But I think we should save that till obviously we'll be breaking down the card, not this week, the week after. So we can talk more in depth about it there. So we might as well just wait till then. Um, Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Combat Chatters podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Make sure to rate us 5 stars, Spotify, share us around. That's how we'll grow. So thank you for listening.